Thank you so much. Is that working okay? Can you all hear me? Awesome. I've just changed my mind. Sorry about that, because I was going to stand up, but then I remembered that I'm a terrible pacer when I'm talking, and honestly, I would just keep walking away from the microphone. I did that in Edinburgh once. I'm going to mention that again later. So the cameras were on, and all of a sudden, like, the speaker just vanished. It was a classic. Anyway, thank you for having me here, first of all. It's lovely to be here, Forth Valley Feminists. Thank you so much. I am indeed now a haulage driver and courier, sort of half and half. I used to be a children's author. I thoroughly enjoy truck driving, and one of the reasons I thoroughly enjoy truck driving is that they are remarkably unsexist compared to the publishing industry. Strange, isn't it? They know what a woman is, and if I'm struggling with a pallet, someone will offer to help me because, yeah, weak and feeble women and all that. Yeah, okay, I don't have the muscles. But they don't care that I'm a woman, and it's extremely refreshing. My job, just to explain it quite briefly, as a children's writer, I was able to be fired because I wasn't strictly freelance in the normal sense. I started writing children's novels in about 2008, 2009, and I published several of my own young adult novels, but I was employed, I was approached and headhunted by a company called Working Partners, which you may not have heard of, but are an extremely successful company in the publishing world, because what they do is develop and package concepts. So if you've ever been tormented by Beast Quest or the Rainbow Fairies, as I was, those are Working Partners books. And I work for a brand called Erin Hunter, which was animal fantasy. Don't get me started on the furry connection. So I was brought on board to that brand. I worked for them from about 2011 to 2020, so 9 or 10 years. And I worked for them very successfully. I was good at my job. I was the face of Erin Hunter in front of the public. There were 7 or 8 writers, but I was the one who went on tour, did presentations, and I was quite good at that side of it too. You wouldn't think so by messing my notes, but I was quite good at speaking in schools. And I was good at the writing. They did not employ me out of the kindness of their hearts, is what I'm saying. I was good at my job. I was also on Twitter from day one, and I was always extremely opinionated. And they knew it. I got involved in many issues. Some of them extremely contentious, and I did speak my mind under what was my own Twitter account, although it mentioned my jobs and my work. None of it caused any problems. The independence referendum, they didn't care. My agent didn't care, my publishers didn't care. The Corbyn years, Labour, the whatever mess the Tory party had made, nobody cared. I could tweet about whatever I liked, and I could tweet about it extremely strongly. And then came transgender issues. Now, I tweeted about this from about 2017, when it started sort of coming to my notice. And I was trying to think back to when it first really came to my notice, and I was sort of vaguely aware of it, but I think it was the attack on Mariah McLachlan at Hyde Park. And I've thought back to it, I think that was the moment when I said, now hold on a minute. And I started to tweet a lot more about it. I was still followed by my publishers, and my agent, and my packagers, and their executives. Nobody said a word. I even had some quite civil conversations with members of the editorial staff at Working Partners on Twitter publicly about the issue, them on one side, me on the other. Then along comes 2020, and the monstering of first Rachel Rooney and then J.K. Rowling. You'll all know about the J.K. Rowling one. I mean, it's shocking what happened to her. I mean, I don't care how wealthy and successful you are, that kind of monstering and abuse has to be so destructive and damaging. It was absolutely horrific. But before the huge pile-on J.K. Rowling, there was one on a writer called Rachel Rooney, and many of you will have heard of her too. Rachel Rooney, she's an autistic author. She wrote beautiful books for children. She wrote a book called My Body Is Me. The most beautiful rhyming book for children that you can imagine. Diverse, beautifully illustrated, rhymes that rolled off the tongue, and such a beautiful message that your body is you. Respect it, preserve it, love it, be proud of it. And she was driven from the publishing industry. Not by trolls, not by anonymous trolls on Twitter. Rachel Rooney was driven out of publishing by a clique of children's authors who disagreed with her. A truly horrible crowd who decided that she was wrong, she was evil, and she needed to be destroyed. And destroy her they did. She could not face being in publishing anymore because of the abuse that was heaped on her for writing a perfectly beautiful children's book. I was furious. I tweeted about it, and I also tweeted the hashtag I stand with J.K. Rowling, as many of us did. Now, things were quiet for a couple of weeks, but see that hashtag is blood in the water. 25th of June 2020, I woke up to a couple of hostile tweets. I blocked and moved on, because that's what you do, right? That day, they kept coming, and they kept multiplying. So for 24 hours, basically, there was abuse, death threats, rape threats, piling on for 24 hours. I got to sleep about 5 o'clock the next morning. Woke up about 9 to frantic calls from my agent. And then to calls from the packager and the publisher. Packager, working partners, said they had to wait for the publisher, HarperCollins. Incidentally, nobody asked for my side of this. And at 9 o'clock a.m. New York time, which was 2 p.m. UK time, I was fired summarily, dismissed for the crime of being abused on Twitter. Wow. I don't know how that works. So that's kind of how it happened. Now, publishers, if I can paraphrase the wonderful Rosie Duffield, publishing has a woman problem. And it's kind of derives from a time, publishers, they're terrified of mobs, terrified. They should have stood up to the first mob who came for the first author over the first issue. And we will not even remember now who or why that is. But they should have stood up the first time. They didn't. So when it came to this issue, when there is a huge mob of people ready to pounce on authors, and particularly women's authors, they were not equipped in the slightest degree to face it down. There used to be a Twitter account, I've checked it recently and it hasn't tweeted in years. It was called Don't Go to Goodreads, and it was kind of a funny Twitter account, and it was basically, authors don't go to Goodreads. It was a joke. Do not read Goodreads reviews. They're just going to make you unhappy. And it was true. You know, I mean, you get terrible reviews on Goodreads. But rather than don't go to Goodreads, the rule in publishing is now we take our orders from Goodreads. Yeah. We take our orders from Goodreads, from book bloggers, from Twitter mobs, and we don't even know who they are. Now, publishers first got into book bloggers. They saw an opportunity to get free publicity, easy publicity. I mean, newspapers will not always review their book. They have to be selective. You have to have a certain amount of influence. The publisher has to push the book to get it reviewed, get it out to reviewers, get it reviewed. This was not true of book bloggers. There were many of them. They were hungry for books, and publishers thought this was cheap and easy marketing. Somewhere along the way, that became twisted, and book bloggers suddenly thought they weren't just there to give their opinion of a book, whether it was good or bad, whether it was well written, whether these, the issues in a particular book were properly addressed, because that is a reasonable question. Has this author dealt with racism, sexism, whatever, in a sensitive and intelligent way? No. The book bloggers decided that part of their job was not just to review books, but to review authors. They had to have power. They wanted power over what an author said, what an author thought, whether an author should be published at all by a publisher. And essentially, they were given far too much power, and publishers caved to them. They're still caving, and particularly on this issue, they're still caving. And as I say, if they stood up the first time, this would never have happened. But one victory and the mob of Twitter will just keep going, and nothing will ever be good enough. And who is, at the same time as publishers being terrified of Twitter mobs, the industry itself has been completely captured by transgender ideology. And I mean wholesale capture. If you want to be an author, get a contract with a publishing house, do not have gender critical views. Because it's not going to happen for you. They are going to check your views, they're going to check them on Twitter, they're going to check your history. They will simply not take you on because they don't think it's worth their while, the grief. And who are they scared of? They're scared of teenage TRAs, perverts, furries, misogynists, anonymous trolls. And they are essentially in control of the publishing industry. And goodness, do they hate women. And that's why I say publishing has a women problem. The CEOs will not listen to the authors who they know to be competent, who they know to think about things carefully. That doesn't matter. As soon as a mob comes for you, you're dust. And the same has happened to many women's authors. There's an author called Christina Dulcher who wrote a book called Vox, a young adult novel, very, very successful. She had a character in it who was a lesbian. She sold the film rights. The film company decided that the lesbian character wasn't good enough, it had to be trans. She's pulled her book from the film company. Good for Christina. Julia Robertson's another lesbian author from the States. She was initially hailed as a great lesbian author. She wasn't particularly outspoken on trans, but she had her opinions. Her book was also pulled from the shelves. She had a conversation with her publisher about it. Her publisher has a trans child, read gay child, and her book was just pulled. She can't sell her books anymore. She makes her living from journalism. And then we have our own Maggie Gibson, who was speaking today. I presume most of you were here for Maggie. Maggie refused to sign the Code of Conduct from the Scottish Book Trust, which is there for one purpose only. It's a code of conduct that covers not just what you say in school events and publishing, it covers what you say privately, it covers what you say on Twitter, it covers anything you say out loud, and they can pull you from the list if you go against their thinking. And we know that's not about any issue other than the transgender issue, I'm afraid, because they simply don't want people talking about it. Jenny Lindsay, also here, hounded. Her Anatomy of a Hound, if you can get hold of it, her Anatomy of a Hounding essay from Dark Horse Publishing is fantastic. And still being persecuted, and still, you cannot beat the publishing industry at the moment on this. It is too monolithic in its thinking. And the publishing industry, of all industries, the publishing industry is supposed to be about creativity and expression and imagination. And that is now the last thing you can dare to do as an author in the current publishing industry. You will have that scold's bridle fitted, then you know, fasten it and close a pen. You simply won't be published, and if you are published, you'll be cancelled. So I'm sorry to be very negative about the publishing industry, but I truly believe that this thing is on the turn. The publishing industry will be the absolute last industry to admit it's wrong. I guarantee it. Because while publishers like J.K. Rowling, hello Bloomsbury, you'll notice Bloomsbury have not cancelled her, I wonder why. Getting so much abuse though, so much abuse. JKR, Rachel Rooney, Christina Dalcher, Julia, Maggie, Jenny, all of those are persona non grata. Who is celebrated? Who is presented as a face of young adult writing? Who is invited onto BBC World at 1 to give their erudite opinions? The artist formerly known as James Dawson, who, if you were there today for Dr. M's fantastic speech about pornography, has a book for 12 plus. And as I say, terrible notes, I just scribble all over them all the time. But I went to Dr. M and I got the quotes. And what did he say in his book for 12 plus? This protagonist, with whom children should identify, talks about being fucked both ends like a little piggy, a fucking cum slut, and a worthless tranny whore. This is what schools in the publishing industry think is appropriate for 12-year-olds. This is serious. The ALCS, Authors Licensing and Collection Society, I may have got that slightly wrong. I thought it was just an organisation that involved the collection of licensing fees for authors. They've got a prize at the moment for 11 plus. There's a list of books recommended for this, for the short list. Some of the books on that list are for 14 plus and are essentially based on queer theory. And that's for a prize for 11 plus fiction. Something doesn't compute. Something does not compute. And of all people you'd think authors could go to protect them from the vagaries of online mobs, trolls, and their publishers, their craven publishers, you think it'd be the Society of Authors, the venerable trade union of authors. Rachel Rooney approached the Society of Authors. She was told, we don't get involved in private squabbles. She was being abused and driven from publishing by a group of children's authors, prominent children's authors, by the way. I had an argument with the Society of Authors about this on Twitter. I never bothered, in my case, to approach the Society of Authors because I saw how they treated Rachel and I knew it was an absolute waste of my time. I went straight to the Free Speech Union. So I had this argument on Twitter with the Society of Authors who said, we're only here for contractual questions, rights questions, financial questions, you know. And they provide an excellent service, checking contracts. I went onto their website, I went onto it again this morning, and one of their principal aims, protecting free speech and creating an environment where everyone is afforded an equal voice. Freedom of expression is a fundamental human right and a central tenet of an author's work and livelihood. We work to protect free speech and to create an environment where all are afforded an equal voice. Aww. Except women, unless you agree with the men. We oppose in the strongest terms any attempt to stifle or control the author's voice, whether by censoring, imprisonment, execution, hate speech, or trolling. Not our job. And then they finish with the old Orwell quote, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Anyway, I pointed this out to them on Twitter to the Society of Authors. Reader, they blocked me. So, yes, a very, very brave group of authors attempted just before Christmas to have the Society of Authors stand up for free speech, especially in the case of gender-critical women, but generally free speech, to restate that they would defend authors' right to creativity and freedom of expression. It was voted down 600 to 200, something like that. I can look up the proper numbers. The Society of Authors membership, or a small proportion of them, voted down free speech. I kid you not. Anyway, so there we are. The very industry that should be defending free speech and free expression has abandoned what it should be doing, what it should always have done. And what ideas are they afraid will be expressed? What is the speech they really don't want to hear? Is it fascism? Is it communism? Is it racism? Is it anarchy? Is it political violence? Is it political terrorism? No. It's women's sex-based rights. That's what scares them. This was something I started to worry about way back. I thought I saw something coming. At the time of the Salman Rushdie, if you're old enough to remember the fatwa against Salman Rushdie originally, shamefully. Now, I just assumed that all writers and publishing organisations would stand behind Salman Rushdie 100%. Absolutely no prevaricating, nothing. Instead of which, a few did not. They said he shouldn't have said that, he offended people. And I personally trace my misgivings back to that point. Shirley Williams sat on Question Time and said that he shouldn't have offended people. He was asking for it, basically. I thought at the time this was an aberration, that people would be absolutely horrified by it. I mean, I went to university in the 80s, and you were expected to kind of know your way around Plato and Hobbes and all the rest, but you were also expected to know your way around Mein Kampf and Das Kapital. You were just expected to know this stuff. You weren't supposed to avoid it because you were triggered. And I thought those values would prevail. I thought the publishing and writing industry in particular would coalesce around the basic need for freedom of expression and the protection of the vulnerable voices. And I'm including women in that. Instead of which, it's crept on, it's become worse. It's the rise of sensitivity readers, for example. Now, any good editor will tell you if you're being stupid in a book and you should rephrase something. That's what editors are for. You know, for goodness sake, don't use that word. It's a stupid cliche. Think of something else and be more original. That's what editors are for. Instead of which you now have an army of sensitivity readers, all of whom have their own agendas and who will often disagree with each other. And they will comb your book, pulling out bits that they personally find offensive. And if you disagree, your book will be pulled. Your book will be pulled from the shelves. So it's a case of from going from the right to be offensive, it's gone back to like, no, don't offend anyone, especially men. If you're going to do these things, you bring death threats on yourselves. I mean, the chair of the management committee of the Society of Authors actually tweeted in the wake of a death threat to J.K. Rowling a really stupid, facile poll asking, how many death threats have you had, sort of thing. And it was the most ill-considered piece of polling, and she eventually deleted it. She reposted it in a slightly less insensitive terms. But the chair of the management committee of the Society of Authors, treating a death threat to a writer in the wake of an attack on Salman Rushdie as a joke. Where has the publishing industry gone wrong? It's free speech is a principle that's now mocked and derided. It's somehow turned into something that's right-wing. For goodness sake, there's nothing right-wing about free speech. As if it's some silly, outdated notion for middle-class women, rather than the bedrock on which our entire society is built. And I am not going to stay out of important arguments just because of violent, nameless Twitter accounts. And I really, really wish a lot of authors would do the same. Unfortunately, and I've talked to a lot of authors about this, needless to say, and a lot of them, it's not that they disagree with it's that they disagree with what I'm saying, but they won't listen to my actual reasons for what I'm saying. So they just think I'm transphobic. They don't think it's anything about women's sex-based rights. I just hate trans people. I doubt. And they are, the number of times I've seen straw man arguments on Facebook. It's terrible what these women believe. And then they'll say something, trans people don't exist, and all trans people should be genocided. All the things we don't say. And it's because they're scared to listen to the arguments, because I do believe that if a lot of these people listened to the arguments, they simply would be unable to disagree. So they are scared to actually listen to what we are saying. That is why they put up straw man arguments that they can disagree with. That any reasonable person could disagree with. They're frightened not to speak, they're frightened to think. And that is a shocking position in which to put authors, especially authors who are writing for the next generation. It's a shocking example to set. I've got to watch my time. Anyway, I wanted to end on a high note, a positive note. I'm thinking of Marina's spiral staircase. I'm thinking it's definitely going up the way. Even though it's kind of turning around in itself, it's going in an upwards direction. In 2020, just after I was cancelled, I was invited to a speaker's corner in Edinburgh. It was a wonderful event. That's where I first met Lucy. And there wasn't even a counter-protest or much of one. They kind of turned up and went off again because there wasn't, there were a few of us. It was a great event, but it was great. There was also, after I was cancelled, I approached a few supportive women on Twitter, including Marina. Oh, is there a DM group? Is there a message group I could join? Because I feel a bit alone and I feel a bit vulnerable. And is there a message group I can join? And now look at us. Now look at us. Look at you. I cannot keep up with the number of message groups. It's brilliant. There are so many of us. Alex Cole-Hamilton, shameless tweet the other day to say he and the Lib Dems don't approve of of male rapists in women's prisons. Well, why did you vote against the amendment then? Now, 2 years ago he'd have been cheered to the skies, of course. But what happened when he tweeted that? Well, as Crocodile Dundee might have said, now that's a ratio. People know, at last. People are waking up. People are angry. We are not scared anymore. We're not alone, nothing like alone. And we are going to win. Thanks.